This video will explain the editing option referred to as add or cut the inside of a shape. I will begin by switching to the surfaces mode, and then I'll create a cylindrical surface. I'll give it a diameter of 6 units, 8 units long in the x-axis, and 4 units wide in the y-axis. Next, I will put some text over the cylindrical surface. I'll draw a box to show MillWrite where I want the text to fit into. Then I type some text. Next, I will set the font to be true type because the editing option to add or cut the inside of a shape requires shapes that have an inside, but a single stroke font does not have an inside or an outside. I will pick the Arial font. Next, I will create a polyline that also has an inside area. I will click the right mouse button to bring up the drawing menu and select the Draw Polyline option. And then I will draw an arbitrary shape. And I will close it by clicking the Start node. I now have a closed polyline that has an inside area. I will now switch to the 3D mode. The top of the cylinder is at Z0. The text and the polyline are whatever Z value I have set for my defaults. So if you were to do this, you would likely find that your text and polyline are at a slightly different Z level than mine. Next, I select the option to cut the interior. With this option, the Z level of the items are significant. To understand this, I will set the tool to cut rather than add. Since the text and polyline are only slightly below the surface of the cylinder, they are not going to cut very far into the surface. I will click the Apply button in order to cut their interiors. Notice that only the area that was below the surface has been cut. Next, I will set the ortho mode to Z-axis only so that I can move these items down in the Z-axis. The easiest way to set the ortho mode to Z-axis only is to press the Z key on the keyboard. Pressing the Z key a second time will put the ortho mode back to whatever it was. You can also click the ortho button or press the F8 key on the keyboard. Now that the ortho mode has been set to the Z-axis, I will move the text item down a bit, and I will also move the polyline down a bit. Now I click the Apply button, and both of those items are cut to their new Z level. Next, I will move the polyline in the X-axis by selecting the X ortho mode. Now when I click the Apply button, the interior of that polyline is once again cut to its particular Z level. By moving that polyline up and down in the Z-axis, and by moving it around in the X and Y axes, and by clicking the Apply button, I can repeatedly cut the interior of it at different Z levels and different XY locations. The same concept is true when you switch to adding material rather than cutting material. Material will be added only up to the Z level of the item. For example, I will move the text and polyline up in the Z-axis. And now when I click the Apply button, the material is added up to that Z level. By moving the polyline around and clicking the Apply button, I can add material wherever I want it. In this example, I selected a flat tool. If I select a tool that has a shape, then I have the option of setting the size of the tool. This will result in what could be described as creating a chamfer or an edge. It also requires that you set the size of the tool to fit inside the item that you are cutting. If the tool is too large, nothing is going to happen. To understand this option, I will delete this cylinder and create a new one. This time I will delete the cylinder by clicking the right mouse button to access the editing menu, and then selecting the option to delete item, and then clicking one of the 5 handles. I will also delete the text because that text requires a small tool to cut inside of the letters, and it's easier to understand how the tool shape affects the editing when you use a larger tool. But a larger tool requires a larger interior area. To create another cylindrical surface, I could click the menu button in the upper left corner with the mouse and select the option to create a cylinder, just like I did last time. But since the last time I accessed the menu was to create a cylinder, it is easier to use the keyboard. When you want to access the same menu option several times in a row, it is easier to press the Escape key to bring up the menu, and then press the Enter key as many times as necessary. When I press the Escape key, the menu appears, and the cursor bar is put on the menu option I previously selected. So all I have to do is press the Enter key. That puts the cursor bar on the next menu item that I previously accessed. So I press the Enter key again. And now I'm at the data fields to create a cylinder. And the data fields contain the same values that I previously set them to. So to create the exact same cylindrical surface, I just click the OK button. I will set the ortho mode to the Z-axis by pressing the Z key on the keyboard. And I will move the surface down a bit in the Z dimension. This time I will select a ball end mill, and a new field appears that lets me set the tool size. I will set it to 1/2 unit. Now when I click the Apply button, MillWrite adds material to the inside of that polyline, but the edge has the shape of a ball end mill. I will now select a tapered tool and give it a 60-degree taper. I will set the ortho mode to the x-axis and move the shape a bit. Now when I click the Apply button, the edge has the shape of a 60-degree taper. When you click the Apply button, every shape that is over a surface will be used to cut or add material to the surface. In some cases, you will not want some of the text and polylines to be used when you click the Apply button. For example, I will put several rectangles on top of this cylinder. If I click the Apply button, all of those rectangles will be used to edit the surface. When you want only certain items to be used, you have 4 options. One option is to put the items on different layers and turn off the layers that you don't want used for editing. The second option is to move the items off the surface. However, this option is a nuisance if the XY locations of the items are important. The third option is to let the mouse hover over an item and press the Y key on the keyboard. If you want only one item to be actively involved with editing the surface, let the mouse hover over it and then press the Y key on the keyboard, and only that item will be used. I will demonstrate this option. I will click the Undo button to put the surface back to what it was. Now I will let the mouse hover over a rectangle, and when its parameters appear on the right side of the screen, I press the Y key on the keyboard. Only that rectangle was used for editing. The fourth option is to mark the items that you want to use. When you click the Apply button, only the marked items will be used. I will now demonstrate this option. I will undo what I did, and this time I will click the right mouse button to bring up the editing menu and select the option to mark and unmark items. I will now click this rectangle to mark it, and I'll click this rectangle also. When you mark an item, you can tell that it has been marked because it will display in a repeating blend of colors. You can change the primary color for the marked items by clicking the Layer button and then jumping to the bottom of that window by clicking your right mouse button on this downward arrow. And then you can change the color of the marked items. Now when I click the Apply button, only those two marked rectangles are used. I can move or alter those rectangles and click the Apply button again, and only those two will be used to edit the surface. When I am finished, I can click the Marks button at the top of the screen and select the option to either hide the marks or clear the marks. If I hide the marks, that means those items will return to normal, but MillWrite will remember that they were marked. You can restore their marked status by clicking the Marks button and selecting the option to restore marked items. Now those two items are marked once again. If the marked button does not show, that means there are no marked items in the drawing, and there are no items with hidden marks either.